So glad you're joining us for the series that we're calling Add, Follow, Block. We live in a really interesting age. Nobody who has lived in human history has had to deal with the volume of information and actually the volume of relationships. It's the weirdest thing because we have more friends than we ever have had before on social media, and all the studies point to one reality, that as human beings, we've never felt more alone. And so what we've been doing over the last few weeks is we've been trying to figure out, okay, who or what do we need to add in our lives? Is there anybody we need to limit? How do we boost what's good? Is there anything we need to block? Like, how do you get rid of the toxic? Because we kind of live in an increasingly toxic culture, tone-wise. And so we're trying to figure that out. And we're really glad that you joined us for this part of the series. And you may not, if it's your first time, know that you're walking into church at part 4 of a 4-part series. And what is a series and all that stuff. But bottom line, here's what we want you to know. Amazing things happen when people show up, whether you're showing up at one of our locations or you're watching or listening later. But we hear all the time that people were strangely moved. Like all of a sudden, non-emotional people are like, I'm getting teary-eyed. What's going on here? And here's what I think is going on. I think God's Spirit is at work. And there really is. Some of you are here because you're investigating, is there really a God? What about the Bible? That's an ancient document. Like, can it actually be trusted? What am I going to do with my life? Is there a God? Does he know me? Does he love me? And I think the answer is there is a God, and he's personal, and he's revealed his love to us in Jesus. And we hope ultimately that's what you experience when you come here, that you move into a personal relationship with Jesus. That at the end of the day is far more powerful than any information I can give you, any teaching you can receive, is to have that kind of a personal relationship with Christ, and we're happy to help you facilitate that. Actually, at the end of the message, I'll give you an opportunity to respond to Jesus through prayer and invite him to be the Lord and the leader of your life. But along the way, God hasn't left us without instruction. It's not like it's just a big mystery until we get to heaven. And he gave us a lot of good teaching, I believe, in the scripture. And so we're going to continue to look at some Bible passages, one in particular, as it helps us figure out what to add, how to boost the good and delete the toxic from our life. Now, to help with that, you not only have the 4 messages that I preached as part of this series, but we added some bonus stuff. So we have an audio podcast that you can download for free, subscribe to and download for free. Not only will you get the 4 messages, but we have a couple of bonus podcasts that are being uploaded right now. So I have the privilege to speak to a lot of leaders and some of the other work that I do. And last week I introduced you to some of the thinking and the writings of Henry Cloud. Some of you already know him. Today I'm going to talk about some writing of John Townsend. So I actually did an interview with Henry Cloud and a separate one with John Townsend, and those are available today on the podcast as free bonus content. And in particular, John Townsend and I drill down even further on what I'm going to teach you in this message during that interview. It's absolutely free, so if you're not yet a subscriber to our audio podcast, please subscribe, and you'll get those bonus interviews as part of what you do. But the big idea over the last month has been simply this, that whatever controls your mind controls your life. Ultimately, what happens is all the inputs gradually shape the output. If you're just following really angry, abrasive people online, you're probably going to be angry and abrasive, or at least more so in real life. That'll probably show up at home, in your key relationships, in your work relationships. And similarly, if you follow better influences, that's probably going to shape who you are too. But it's not just content. We talked about pornography and bad influence. It's also people. And last week, we introduced this idea that who you allow into your life shapes what you allow into your life. And any parent knows this. You're kind of concerned about the company that your children keep. And you know that some people are going to be good influences in their lives, and there's that 1 or 2 friends that you're like, actually, you can't go over to their house, right? Why? Because who you allow into your life shapes what you allow into your life. And if you think about your own life, it's really your friends that determine the outcome of a lot of different seasons of your life. I think back when I was 16 years old, I went on a camping trip. Personally now, I believe camping is unchristian. All right, just so you know. If God made us smart enough to live indoors, we should not go back and live outdoors, but that's like a personal thing. So, but I didn't know that back then. I was so ignorant, so we went camping. And I'm just kidding, I'm just having fun. But we did go camping at 16. I went with some friends. And the day before the incident I'm going to tell you about happened, we saw some people who were cliff jumping, and we circled back the next day. And it was like, okay, well, which of us is going to do it? And I can't swim particularly well, but there was a carrot at the end of the stick. My friend Dan said, okay, I'll tell you what, Carey, I'll give you $100 if you jump off the cliff. And when you're 16 years old, like $100 is like $10,000. And I'm like, okay. So I climb up the cliff and I get to the very top. And you ever do that thing where you kind of go back and forth? And like, am I going to jump? Am I not going to jump? Am I going to? About a half hour. Back and forth, sizing it up. It's a 75-foot cliff. And I don't swim particularly well. But we saw some people who sort of did it the day before. I figured, how bad could it be? So I finally decide I'm going to jump. And it's like, do you jump with shoes, without shoes? I don't know. I decided to jump with shoes and with a bathing suit, which was a good idea. But anyway, my friends are down below with a canoe, which is sort of the rescue mission. You can canoe at least 3 miles an hour and get someone to a hospital quickly. This is how teenagers think. So, if there's a problem, we'll get this taken care of. So finally, I get up the nerve and I jump. And I think, oh, this is going really, really well. Like, it's not a big deal at all. And then I look down and realize that there were about 72 feet left to go. And do you ever get to that point in your life where everything slows down into like slow motion? And it just felt like time just stopped. And suddenly I start to think, I'm like, you know what? I never thought about how I'm going to hit the water. Like, what position are you supposed to be in? Like, cannonball, that would be a big splash, right? Are you supposed to do a pencil dive? Like, I'm not going to dive, but like, how do you actually hit the water? And I'm thinking about this, and I'm like, I don't actually know. Like, this is like real-time thinking on the way down. And so when I finally hit the water, I was in an almost cannonball position, and I was leaning backwards, and when I hit the water, it was like, splat. I went into the lake by about 2 millimeters. It was pretty much like my body should have splattered, right? And, oh man, I gotta tell you, I'm an asthmatic, had the wind knocked out of me. It came back about 3 days later where I could finally breathe again. And then I said to my friend Dan, so where's the $100, right? First words out of my mouth. Anyway, that was a really stupid thing. When I told my mom, she was not happy. I actually think she's still upset about it. And, that was the beginning of the end of the romance with camping. But anyway, so what happened there? It was my friends, right? Think about your teenage years, right? If you got into drugs or drinking, it's not like at 13 you said, I wonder where I can find the local drug dealer. I'm going to go buy some. How does that happen? It was a friend who said, hey, you should try this. That's how it happens. So who you allow into your life shapes what you allow into your life. And this is where we want to camp on today. Pardon the pun. If you want more good things in your life, and who doesn't want more good things in your life? Even if you're investigating Christianity, you're in favor of this. It's like I've never met anybody who says, no, I want more bad things in my life. But if you want more good things in your life, if you want things to go well in your relationships, if you want them to go better at work, if you want things to go better with God, how do you do that? Surprisingly, if you want more good things in your life, this is how you do it. You increase the time you spend with good people. That somehow the amount of investment with good people will result in good things. And how do we know that? Well, we know that from life experience. But again, as I said at the beginning, God didn't leave us without instruction. And so we have been working through 8 verses of Scripture over the course of the last month in this series. And we're going to jump back into Psalm 101. Now, the Psalms were written about 1,000 years before Jesus came. This particular one was written by a king named David. David actually was a man of integrity until the last few years of his life where he made some foolish decisions and it all kind of unraveled. But I mean, when you study him, when he's waiting to be king, when he becomes king, it's a pretty stellar life. And I've always admired David's integrity. And as you've heard me say in previous weeks, Psalm 101 is the manual on how he did it. So he is coming to power, and he's like, I've got to choose my advisors. I have to choose my cabinet. I have to choose my influencers. And then he tells us exactly the criteria. So in previous weeks, we looked at the toxic things and the toxic people he was going to block. But today, he takes us in a different direction. We're going to look at 3 verses. So he says, David says, I will sing of your love and justice, Lord. I will praise you with songs. So that's something you see in the Bible all the time. And maybe if you have a relationship with God through Jesus, that's what you think about. It's like, I want to honor God with my life, right? It's kind of a vertical thing. And then he declares his intention. He says, I will be careful to live a blameless life. If I'm going to be entrusted with power, if I'm going to be the king, I want to do it as best as I can, blamelessly. And then he asked God, when will you come to help me? A great question. You probably prayed that prayer, even if you're not a Christian. It's like, God, if you're there, when are you going to help me? I will lead a life of integrity in my own home. So he does that by deleting a lot of the toxic people and influences. We saw that already. But then he says, here's what I'm going to add. Verse 6. I will search to do this. I will search for faithful people to be my companions. You want to get into the inner circle? You have to be faithful. And only those who are above reproach will be allowed to serve me. I want to be a man of integrity, a leader of integrity, so I'm looking for people of integrity to join me. And what's interesting, and this is where we went last week, this will be review if you were here or you watched the message, is there's really three kinds of people. And the psychologist Henry Cloud, he puts labels on people. He says, as much as I hate labeling people, in all my years as a clinical psychologist, it really does boil down to wise people, foolish people, evil people. Now, again, wisdom is something that can be learned. If you're evil today, that doesn't mean you have to be evil tomorrow. But he says it really boils down to those three categories of people. And he says that's where you land as a clinical psychologist today. And he said that's actually how the Bible sees life too, that really your repeated behavior lands you into a category of wise, foolish, or toxic or evil. And he goes through the differences. Now, what's really difficult about this is everybody on the surface looks the same. Like, I'm sure you've probably seen this in the news, right? You see a picture of the murderer, and you're like, really? You don't look like a murderer. I don't know what murderers look like, you know? But you're like, really? You did that? You actually, you know, there's sometimes mothers who kill their children, and you're like, really? Really? You can't tell because you can't see inside. Some of you, you've had business partners that you thought were awesome. And it turns out they were trying to take you out behind your back. They were evil, but they looked amazing. You really can't tell the difference. So this one, wise people, this one's pure water. This is a glass of water. And actually, you drink freely. It's good for you. This is a glass that looks exactly like water, but it's not. You know what that is? This is sulfurous. You ever had sulfurous water? It's not going to kill you, but it kind of smells like eggs, and it's not very pleasant. And so we got to be really cautious around foolish people. And that's what foolish people are. They seem harmless. They're not going to kill you. But man, tough to be around and really draining. And then evil people, this looks exactly like water, but it's hydrochloric acid. And if I drink it, it'll kill me. And it'll kill you. So be careful because you've got wise, foolish, and evil people. And so you end up with these three categories. And what makes the difference between wise people or wise behavior, foolish behavior, and evil behavior? And the truth is, most of us are a mixture. Because there have been times where you've intended to do something that hurts somebody. That's kind of evil. I've made a lot of foolish decisions in my life, and there have been seasons of my life where I've been pretty foolish on a regular basis. And then hopefully over time, we become wise. You've had some wise moments where you're like, oh, I am so glad. And sometimes it's something you did. Sometimes it's something you didn't. I'm so glad we didn't get married. Or I'm so glad we did. That was the best decision. So it's decision making. But over time, the majority of your behavior becomes wise, foolish, or evil. So what's the definition of wise people? Wise people learn from feedback and change when they encounter the truth. So if you ever let's say you get appointed to be a manager at work or a supervisor of a shift, and all of a sudden people start quitting on you. Well, that's not necessarily good in and of itself. But you know what a wise person does? A wise person says, oh my goodness, this is not good. How am I responsible for this? Oh, you mean if I treat people differently, they're probably going to stick around. Oh, if I tried this, I'll get better. Wise people learn and grow. They change when they encounter the truth. They're open. They take responsibility. They show remorse. I am so sorry. Did that really feel that way when I treated you that way? Oh man, I got to change. And they learn and they grow. And so wisdom can be learned. You can learn how to be a wise person, and wise people consistently do that. Because your life, you bump into reality. That's what your life is every day. You're like, all right, apparently my wife is not very happy with my behavior. What do? Do you learn and grow from that? Do you try to change? You got fired from one job. You got kicked out of class. It's like, do you learn and grow from that? Okay, if you do, that's actually wise behavior. That's actually wise. And over time, you'll become a wise person if you consistently learn and grow. Foolish people, as we saw last week, have a flat learning curve. They are never the problem. You talk to a foolish person, it's like, well, it's not really me. It's like the school, it's my teachers, it's my boss, it's my industry, it's my wife, it's my last 5 wives. Okay, that's the problem. They're all bad. And foolish people, they're defensive. If you're defensive, that's a real sign of foolish behavior. They blame people. It's not my fault, not my fault. They minimize. Oh, it's not that big a deal. Really, it's not that big a deal. They make excuses. They have low self-awareness. They play the victim. Oh, it's not me. It's not my fault. They seek out friends who agree with them, friends who will not challenge them, friends who will just say, oh, that's okay. You know, you're awesome anyway. We're behind you. And they agree with everything that they want to say. So they get a feedback loop that they like because they don't want to change and they don't want to grow. And their life ends up looking like Groundhog Day. They went bankrupt, and instead of learning from that and saving, they got their credit cards back years later and they're maxed out again. It's just over and over and over again, they make the same mistake. They broke up with one person, said, okay, I got to learn, but they brought all that behavior into the next relationship and they never learned. And it's not their fault. That's foolish behavior. And then finally, evil. See, foolish people create all kinds of damage in their life. They can be financial messes, relational messes, vocational messes, and it can be a mess. But the difference between, and evil people make a lot of mess, but you know what the difference is? Intent. Fools don't mean to do it, evil people do. And so evil people want to harm you. They want to bring you down. Evil people, that's a business partner who didn't dissolve the business by mistake. That's a business partner who said, I'm working in the back room against you. That's evil. And evil people, evil behavior is seen as envious. They're envious, divisive, destructive, scheming, and malicious. So what do you do with these 3 categories of people? And last week, and again, if this is your first exposure to this, probably your life is flashing before your eyes, as it does when you're exposed to this, because I think it makes sense of life. And these are biblical categories. What do you do with wise people? You add, you follow, and invest deeply and freely. With foolish people, what do? You limit and establish consequences. And with evil people, you block, you get away, and you stay away. And if you're a Christian, you might be like, aren't we supposed to love all people? Maybe you are not going to be the person that turns that person around. Maybe there are seasons where you pray from a distance because that person is out to kill and destroy. So, what about investing in wise people? What happens when you say, okay, I'm going to seek out some wisdom. I'm going to show you how to do that in this message. You know what it feels like? Let's say this is you. And you're like, I'm going to invest in a wise person. I'm going to sit down with a wise person. Could be somebody you work with, a good friend. Could be somebody from your family. You know what happens? You pour into them, and it sticks. They're like, thank you. And sometimes you can tell a wise person something that's uncomfortable, like, hey, did you know that a lot of us felt really uncomfortable when you said that? And you give that to them, and they're like, thank you. That's hard to hear, but I'm going to learn, I'm going to grow, I'm going to pray about it, I'm going to do differently. And then they pour into you, and you leave, and you're like, oh, that was so life-giving. Sometimes it hurts, but oh, that was so needed and so refreshing. And when you get into a relationship with a wise person, it's that kind of reciprocal relationship where you grow, and they grow, and everybody's better. And you know what it feels like? This is what happens when you invest in wise people. You're better, and they're better. You leave energized, and they're actually better off because it's a mutual thing. Now, what's it like when you invest in foolish people? You know what that's like? Friend calls you, I got a crisis, I got to talk to you right now, you got to come over. And you're like, okay, I'm going to come over. What do you need? What do you need? And so you go through the problem with them, and you pour into them, and you pour into them. Do you have friends like that? And they're no better off. And they're like, oh, well, what's changed? Well, nothing. I still have financial problems. Okay, well, I'll tell you what. I'm going to float you a $1,000 loan. That'll get you through to payday. All right. How's that going? Well, I need a new TV. And, okay, well, you still don't have tuition saved up. So what can we do here? Well, I'll pour a little more into you. And you know what I'm talking about? You're giving people advice. It's like, okay, well, why don't we try this, or why don't we try that, or I'll pray with you and I'll try to help you. And when you invest in foolish people, you're empty, nothing left, and they're no better off. You're empty, you're drained, they're no better off. And some of you, you've been investing in foolish people for years. And now you're drained and you're exhausted, and they're exactly the way they were. It's a flat learning curve. And so when it comes to foolish people, what do? That gets into the caution zone. There's three things: limits, support without enabling, and consequences. Limits is like, look, I know we've been meeting every week for lunch or coffee, or we've been getting together every Friday night, but it's obviously not making a difference. Or maybe you keep telling me you want to learn and grow, but you're not learning and growing. And so you put limits. You support without enabling. Hey, I want to see you get well. But Jesus asked a really important question in the Gospel of John chapter 5. He asked somebody who had been laying by the side of the pool, do you want to get well? Surprisingly, some people don't. So you want to support them without enabling. And consequences. Listen, Carey, if this continues, a month from now, you may not work here. Listen, if you continue to behave this way, we are not going to go on vacation together. Hey, if this continues to happen, I can't keep pouring into you and have it make no difference, so we're just maybe going to stop meeting. Or I'll see you in 4 or 5 months, and we can catch up then. It's limits. And if you want more good things in your life, guess what? You've got to increase the time you spend with good people. So John Townsend, who's written a lot of books with Henry Cloud, came out with a new book that I found really clarifying, and I want to share some of his ideas with you. And he said, basically, there's 3 kinds of people, all right? There's wise, there's foolish, and there's evil or toxic. But there's basically 7 relationships in life that with those different people, you can have different kinds of relationships. And he breaks these down. They all start with C, so they're easier to remember. But see if that doesn't resonate. So he says one of the kinds of relationships that you can have in life is what he calls coaches. Now, if you're in sports, right, that's what happens. You're in elementary school, you make the volleyball team, you have a coach, right? You have somebody who coached you hockey, somebody who coached you baseball. You have a coach. So in sports, you get that. But you also have people in life. There are life coaches. Or some of you go to training and you're learning from people, And so you get coaches. And what's interesting is I always thought as a young leader that the better you got at leadership, the less coaching you needed. The opposite is true. If you're a PGA golfer, you probably have multiple coaches. You've got somebody helping you with your putting, somebody helping you with your driving. You got somebody coaching you on your short game, your long game. Probably a sports psychologist who's helping you get through the mental thing. 90% of golf, once you have the skill set, is up here. And when there's a tournament on the line, a major on the line, and it's that final putt, it's not lost in the body, it's lost in the head. And you got somebody coaching you through that. So coaches can be really good. And coaches are often professionals who just pour into you. Or sometimes that happens, right? You've got a mentor, somebody who just kind of took you under their wing and they're a stage ahead of you in life or in business. But those are people who are pouring into you. They're coaches. Then he says the second kind of relationship you have, he calls them comrades, but really it's close friends. And these are the people, these are not just the buddies you watch the game with or the guy you get together with every Thursday for coffee. This is not just your girlfriends you go shopping with. These are people that you open up your life to. They know pretty much everything about you, and you know everything about them. And it's a mutual relationship. It's life-giving. It's painful at times, but you learn and you grow. And those are close friends. A third kind of relationship is casuals. So these are people you know, and maybe they come over once in a while for a barbecue in the backyard, or you do some casual travel with them. You don't really know them at a very, very deep level, or maybe they're over all the time, but you only talk about superficial stuff. How's it going at work? Hey, what do you think about this team this year? What do you think the Leafs' chances are? How about those Blue Jays, right? They're just casual, and you're not really going deep, but they're friends. They're just not close friends. And then another category is colleagues. These are people you work with or people you go to school with. And those colleagues, you might really enjoy somebody. Maybe you have lunch every day with them, but they're not really close friends. They're just people you work with, and they're people you identify with. And it's important to have those friendships, but it's just a different kind of relationship. And then a fifth kind of person is what they call a caring relationship. And there's a lot of us, particularly in church world or not-for-profit world, where we're in caring relationships. So this is where we have hundreds, like I think 700 people here who serve. So maybe you're on the parking team and you make sure people get parking spots, or you're a small group leader for some of our elementary kids or our high school kids, and that's awesome. But you're kind of the caregiver in that relationship, or maybe you sit on a board of directors, right? Some of you sit on boards. Some of you run your own not-for-profits, your not-for-profits, your nonprofits, which is awesome. Or maybe it's just you've taken a niece or nephew or a neighbor under your wing and you're just kind of coaching them and mentoring them, but you're in a caregiving relationship. So you're in a caregiving relationship, and those are good things. And then he has what you might be familiar with, chronics. These are foolish people. They just keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again. Lots of foolish people. We're not out of them. And then he talks about contaminants, right? Those are evil or toxic people. These people over here who really want to wound and destroy. And he says these are the 7 basic kinds of relationships in life. And you can see that this is sort of the yellow zone and that's the red zone. Now, whenever John Townsend teaches this, he told me, to business leaders, particularly in business, but also just people, like he opens up workshops, you know what he discovers? Everybody's bottom heavy. It's like, I don't really have a coach, and I don't really have a whole lot of close friends. We shared some of this research before, but here's what happens. The more connected we have become on social, the less connected we are in real life. And I used to do counseling, not so much anymore since our church has gotten big, and also I'm no good at it. You come to me for counseling, I'm like, well, did you do your homework? Well, no. Okay, that's it. It's over. Like, I don't know what else to do beyond that. So anyway, don't come to me for counseling. Much better at this. But anyway, whenever people did, and it didn't last very long, people, we have great counselors, by the way, that you can go to, and they're excellent at what they do, and I'll stick to this. But anyway, I would ask them, hey, who else are you talking to about that? You know what the number one answer was? Nobody. Nobody. They didn't talk to their spouse about it because we don't talk about those things. And I said, well, what about your friends? And they're like, well, and this is what they would say. Well, they're just guys from work, or they're people I watch the games with. But like, yeah, we don't really talk about this stuff. And so they're isolated and they're lonely. Most people are bottom heavy. And so my question for you is, are you? Because gravity will take you here, right? If you're not intentional about really developing close friendships, and we'll define that further in a few minutes, but if you're not intentional about it, those don't just happen. And just because you've known somebody from kindergarten doesn't mean they're one of those people. Because there's a mutuality. And you know what? This is where wisdom lives. This is where wisdom lives. And just so you don't feel bad about it, John Townsend told me, he says, hey, when I coach like Fortune 100 corporate leaders, I ask them, who are your close friends? And they'll say, well, you know, my wife, God, like I'm a Christian, so God and I are pretty close, and Max. And he'll say, well, who's Max? It's like, Max is my golden retriever. It's like, well, he's not actually a human being, you know? Like, you can't really, I'm glad you love your dog, but like, that's not. And your spouse, do you know how fatigued some spouses are trying to carry all the burden of being a close friend? And I'm fortunate enough, my wife is my best friend, but she can't be my only friend. And we have a great relationship, and we talk about everything. It wasn't always that way, but we do now. We have a great relationship. We talk about everything. There's nothing off limits. But she can't bear the weight of all the stuff in my life I need to process. And so I've got to develop close friends. And the vast majority of people are bottom heavy. And there's nobody that really, really fits this category in your life. Because you got the guy you're trying to help, and you're trying to help, and you're trying to help, and then you got this, ooh, no, don't go there. But there's nobody really there. So how do you add to the wise? If those are the people you're supposed to add, how do you do that? And Townsend walks you through a sequence, which I thought was brilliant. I wanted to share with you. So here are some questions I put together because I've tried to cultivate those close friendships. And I promise you, it is work, okay? It's actually work. They don't happen automatically. And if they do, you're very fortunate. But I ask myself this question. Is this person that I'm going to spend more time with, do they have a life I want to emulate? All right, not that I want to be them, but like, how are they doing relationally? How's their marriage if they're married? Or do they have a history? Here's another question. Do they have a history of wise decisions? Like, are they pretty good with people? And for what I want to accomplish in my life and what I feel called to? What's their relationship with God like? Are they smart about life decisions, or is their whole life just a series of regrets? Like, I'm not saying there's not room for people who can't qualify for those, but if I'm really going to add somebody and they're really going to be wise, do they have a history of making wise decisions? And again, you already know that by the time you're in high school or college, that somebody's making wise decisions and somebody's not. So it's not a question that they have to be 80, but do they have a history of wise decisions? And then, here's the third one. This is really important, particularly because of social media and technology. Are they willing and able to meet with me? Because some people will just be too busy. Their lives are too busy. Their kids are out every night, or they're leading something big and they don't have time. And it's so easy to convince yourself that, no, I have those relationships because I follow this guy on Instagram and I listen to everything I listen to everything she produces. But they're not your friend. They're actually not your friend. They don't even know you exist, so they can't be a friend. There's this false intimacy thing that's happening where, if you're a public figure, everybody knows you, but you don't know everybody. So are they actually willing and able to meet with me? Do they have time in their life for you? And then what Townsend says is you need at least 3, and he suggests as many as 10 of these close friends. My personal experience is 3 to 5 works really well. But he says, if you want to add to wise people in your life, he suggests that you do what I call the interview. The interview. You actually interview people. And you don't say, hey, I'd like to interview you to see if you want to be my friend. Like, that's weird, okay? Don't do that. But here's what you do. He says you start with your contacts list, and you go through it. And you look at these people. It's like, oh, wow, I almost forgot about him. But that is a great person. I'm going to reach out to them. I'm going to shoot them a text or an email, or I'm going to reach out to them on Facebook or Instagram, and I'll see what they're up to. Or maybe you look at the favorites on your phone and you see, who am I talking to that really would fit the category of wise, a history of wise decisions available to meet with me, and a life I kind of want to emulate. And he says, then you invite them out for coffee or for lunch. And he says, you just have a normal conversation. Chemistry is part of this, right? You want to see if the chemistry is good, but you have a normal conversation. And he says, toward the end, as things are wrapping up, you just crack open the veil a little bit and share something you're struggling with. So, for example, you might say, I'm kind of concerned about things are going great as a whole, but I'm kind of concerned about my 13-year-old. I think they're starting to get into the party scene, and I'm worried they might be on drugs, and you just kind of leave it there. Don't go into a lot of detail, just leave it there. Whatever you're struggling with, just leave it there. And see how they respond. And he says there'll be a set of different responses. He said, here's how some people will respond. They'll hear that, your son's really struggling. And they'll say, oh my goodness, I can't believe it. It's almost 1 o'clock. I got to get back to the office, Hey, it's been really nice having lunch today. You know what that is? Avoidance. Avoidance. It's probably not somebody you're going to add to your wise circle. Another response is, oh, you know what, just have faith. Just God has a way of working this stuff out. And this answer happens a lot in church circles. Just have some faith and trust that God is going to work it all out. That's not the answer you're looking for either. Another possible response is some people will say, oh, your teenage son, you should have seen my daughter. We ended up taking her to rehab, and it was this 15-year journey, and it's sort of like my story is worse than your story. You know those people? That's not the response you want either. Other people will give you what I call the advice machine category. Oh, well, you got to get him up at 7 a.m. He's got to make his bed every day and then put him on a keto diet. And then all of a sudden take him to the gym. And you take him to the gym and you work it out. And here's a good clinical psychologist. And here's a documentary you should be in. And here's a book you should read. And it'll all be fixed. Now, sometimes you need advice like that. But that's not going to be fuel for a great lifelong relationship. Because you know what that'll do long term? It'll kill a friendship. And it kills the friendship because sometimes you just need someone to listen. Sometimes you just need someone to be there. And over time, yeah, advice is helpful. But if that's the first response, that's probably not it. So what are you listening for? Townsend says you're listening for this. I'm so sorry to hear about your son. I didn't know that. How are you coping with that? Or how is that for you? And then they just let you talk. You know what that is? It's empathy. It's empathy. And you're looking for somebody who's not just the advice machine, not somebody who blows you off with a pat spiritual answer, not somebody who's like, oh, yeah, you know, God will work it all out. Not somebody who tries to outstory you. And not someone who can't have that conversation. You just want someone who will listen. And over time, you know, that'll become mutual. And so when you look at it in this context, these close friends, and yeah, you can hire a coach or recruit a coach or whatever, but this becomes a mutual relationship. And you take them back. If you find that person, you bring them back and say, hey, you know, I really enjoyed lunch today. You want to do this again in a couple of weeks? And you do it again. And at the end, you share a little bit more about some other struggle that you've got. And you see what happens. Is it the advice machine? Is it empathy? Like, what are you going to get? And if it becomes mutual, you have one more meeting. And you go for lunch, you go for coffee, you get together. You say, you know what, I've really enjoyed these times. This seems to be like a really life-giving friendship for me. Would you like to do this more regularly? Would you like to get together on like a regular basis? We just put it in the calendar. Now, Townsend goes into a lot more detail about forming a life team like this, and you can read that in the book or hear more about that on the podcast. But I'll tell you, it's amazing. And I've had to work at these relationships, but I have a few close friendships. In fact, I'm having dinner with one guy tomorrow night who's become this for me. And these might shift from season to season, but they're not advice machines. They're not like every time you open up, it's like, oh, here's what you should do. Now, they may have advice down the road, but they just kind of listen, they empathize. And they share something that happened in their life, and you kind of listen and empathize, and maybe you got a thought or two, and they're comfortable with the truth. This isn't all fun. Sometimes they tell you, actually, you know what, you're being a real jerk to your wife right now. And I'd really pay attention to that. Because I think she could leave you. Or you know what? That's too many drinks. Like, buddy, I just got to tell you, I think you're drinking too much. And so sometimes, but that, again, is just, that's life-giving when you find it. And most of us are bottom heavy. Most of us live down here. So whatever controls your mind controls your life, but who you allow into your life shapes what you allow into your life. And if you want more good things in your life, increase the time you spend here with good people. Now, this isn't going to be an instant solution where you have a bunch of coffees or lunches over the next month or two and all of a sudden you're a whole lot better. But what will happen is when you build these relationships and you nurture them over time, even 3 to 5, eventually you start to say, wow, my life things are becoming clear and things are getting better, right? We're in an instant culture. You go to the gym, work out for an hour, jump on the scale and go, why am I not down 20 pounds? Well, it's like if you do that 3 times a week for 3 or 4 months, you might actually be down 20 pounds and watch what you eat. But if you invest in this over time, wow, your life will change. And if you want more good things in your life, increase the time you spend with good people. Add and follow. Limit. We all have space in our lives, and we should, for a few people like this. And block. And what you'll discover is that life starts to make a lot more sense. And as you read through Scripture, what God has to say about people and about you and about life will make a lot more sense too. Let's pray together. Father, I just pray that you would you give us wisdom to know what to do with these words. And maybe for some of us, we just want to start by opening up our lives and hearts to you, perhaps for the first time. Some of us have never committed our lives to you, and some of us did years ago, but it has been forever. And if today's the day for you, would you pray this prayer with me? Lord Jesus, today I invite you into my life and I ask you to be my Savior. I want to know you because I want to know God. And you are the way, the truth, and the life. And today I confess that. And I ask you to forgive me for my sins. Forgive me for my foolish ways. And I make you the Lord and the leader of my life. Come into my life, Holy Spirit. Come and guide me. I give you myself. And if you prayed that prayer, just know we are celebrating with you today. And Father, I pray you would help us all to grow wiser, to add and follow the influences that really bring the best out in life, the best out in us, the image of God in us, and to limit and block those that don't. In the process, may the world become a better place. In Jesus' name.